Did you know that it's believed Jane Seymour neglected and mistreated little baby Elizabeth? When Henry VIII had his second wife executed for treason, he proposed to his third wife, Jane Seymour, the very next day, and their wedding took place just 11 days later, much to the country's surprise. Jane would continue as queen to Henry VIII for a little over a year, and in that time it is now thought that she was neglectful towards her stepdaughter, little Elizabeth. Immediately upon her mother Anne Boleyn's death, little Elizabeth was quickly declared illegitimate. Her household was dissolved, and she was left with just a few servants and her governess, to live in less than princessly standards. And of course, in the months that followed Anne Boleyn's death, Elizabeth, who had only been 2.5 at the time, was of course growing, and after some time she outgrew all of her dresses. Her governess of course informed the king, her father, of this, but it was met with very little interest from Henry VIII. And people now claim that Jane Seymour then too was responsible for her neglect, since she should have spoken up for little Elizabeth, as she already had done for her other stepdaughter Mary, who had since been allowed to return to court. What people tend to forget, however, is that things were never as simple as it seems, and certainly not as simple as it would have been in this day and age. In the months following Anne Boleyn, Henry was still very much in the belief that Elizabeth may not even be his child. Remember that he firmly believed that Anne Boleyn had been unfaithful to him, and in his mind that created the possibility that Elizabeth was not his daughter. His anger on the whole topic of Anne Boleyn was not yet settled, and following her shocking execution, Jane and the rest of the country knew that she was a sore subject. Just a few months into Jane's queenship, Jane herself was threatened by Henry that she too may face the same fate as her predecessor if she were to meddle in his affairs. Jane did not feel safe to broach the subject of Elizabeth, a subject that caused the king to see red still, as Anne Boleyn's end was still very fresh and shocking in the people's minds. Jane's involvement in bringing the Lady Mary back to court was only acceptable to Henry because Mary had herself just signed the oath of succession after years of refusing, and Mary having no connection with Anne Boleyn meant her reconciliation with her father was not a dangerous subject. Sadly, the same was not true for baby Elizabeth, and Jane, who took 7 months to become pregnant by Henry, was walking on very thin ice for quite some time with Henry herself. People tend to forget that it must have been a very scary time for Jane, who had been just as disturbed and shocked as everyone over Anne's treatment in her final days. Once she had given Henry his precious son Edward, I do believe that Jane would have gone on to unify Elizabeth with her father too. Sadly, however, she died just 12 days after giving birth to Prince Edward.